Good evening. Welcome to tonight's On the Edge with me, Theo Chalmers. Tonight's show is 2 hours long and live, so if you have any questions for my guests during the show, text them to 87778 with the word EDGE, a space, and then your name, location, and your message, and we'll try to pick up at any that really hit the mark. They're all charged at a standard rate, so why not get ready to text? It's likely that many who tune into this show on a regular basis are not convinced by the official story of 9/11, i.e. that 19 Muslim hijackers, armed only with box cutters, hijacked 4 planes and flew 2 of them into the Twin Towers, 1 into the Pentagon, and the 4th into a field in Shanksville, Pennsylvania. It's also fairly likely that many of those same viewers feel the Twin Towers and the 47-story Building 7, which collapsed into its own footprint late in the afternoon of 9/11, were brought down using explosives, perhaps thermite, thermate, or even nanothermate. However, my 2 guests tonight, supported by careful analysis of the film evidence and extraordinary evidence from independent scientist John Hutchison, who sadly cannot be with us tonight, believe that, at the very least, the Twin Towers were more likely to have been brought down by directed energy weapons. They believe that the buildings were literally turned to dust, including most of the structural steel, and simply blew away, leaving the site polluted by extremely weird effects, even now, over 8 years later. Even more controversially, they believe that the Twin Towers were not hit by passenger jets at all, and that the filmed evidence we have all seen contradicts Newtonian physics and is therefore impossible. My guests tonight are researcher Andrew Johnson from checktheevidence.com, who is here in the studio, and Professor of Mechanical Engineering Dr. Judy Wood from drjudywood.com, who is online from the USA via Skype video. What a show we've got tonight! Andrew, I'll say welcome to you first.
Thank you very much, Theo, and I really appreciate the invite onto the programme.
Not at all. And I'll say hello to Dr. Judy Wood. Hopefully she's online.
Hello.
Hello. We can't see you for some reason. Ah, there we are. We can see you. Excellent. So I think I'll start with you, Dr. Judy Wood, if I may, because I think you were the person who first came out and spoke about this evidence in the way that you speak about it. If you want to give me just a quick description of how you came to the understanding that you've come to about what happened on 9/11, I'd really appreciate that.
Well, when my eyes and ears don't agree, I tune out my ears and just use my eyes. And that happened pretty immediately on 9/11. And I just independently thought through it, but wondered why nobody else was. And that always leaves you uncomfortable because you kind of like to go with the herd. But the herd didn't make sense, and I proved it over and over again to myself. And then I began looking at the evidence and just going through as many photographs as I could get a hold of. And sort of imagining I was there, feeling it, smelling it, tasting it, standing in it. I got to know where every piece of debris is, sort of reliving it through all the photographs. And it wasn't just depending on one photograph. I would have photographs from like 5 different sources that all would say the same thing. They're all in agreement. And the evidence, I believe that if you let the evidence speak to you and you listen to it, it'll tell you exactly what happened. And I learned about energy weapons. I didn't know such things existed, but the evidence told me they did. And after looking at all the evidence and categorizing it, I happened upon John Hutchison's website, and by golly, every single one of the same phenomena were reproduced, which is very striking and scary. And I think I remember telling Andrew about it then, and Andrew was familiar with John at the time, though I wasn't, and all of the dots connected. It was pretty amazing. I'm not saying that it is the Hutchison effect, but it's the same type of physics involved in both.
Well,
and John Hutchison's examples are sort of a proof of concept of this type of physics.
okay. Let me just get Andrew into the room again, if I may. So, Andrew, you've been working with Dr. Judy Wood, haven't you, on this? So, again, this is a journey of discovery for you. I know you've been to America and spoken in public with her and been on radio shows and spoken a lot in the UK about this. And I know you've also faced a lot of opposition from people who think they know the answers. I mean, how do you deal with that criticism?
Well, you know, I just used the phrase that's the title of my website. As Dr. Wood just said, check the evidence. And if you keep looking at the evidence, you can rule out, you know, certain things that could not have happened. And that's what I tried to do all along. And I realised that my early assumptions about 9/11 were mistaken. And I found out that there was yet another backstory, you know, beneath the one which was said to explain the anomalies. And when you actually look at that story with the explosions in the towers and this sort of thing, it just doesn't explain the evidence. It explains some of it, but it doesn't explain enough of it.
All right, well, I think what we should do is we should go to a film we've got of the impact on the second tower, of how it becomes dustified. So if we can go to that dustified film, please.
To see this now, but if you look at the pieces that are coming down, you can actually see some of the pieces turning to dust.
Those spikes in the middle there.
Yeah, and this particularly is the smoking gun evidence, which I think you'll find a lot of people not happy talking about. This is about 70 columns of unsupported steel turning to dust before your very eyes, and I've got about 3 or 4 clips that I edited together so you can see this from different angles, and we also have a still image sequence showing the same thing. So, you know, what can turn steel to dust? The only thing that I know that can turn steel to dust is a file. Explosives don't turn steel to dust.
No, they just break it up, don't they?
Correct.
Or bend it.
Into chunks. But in this sequence you can see the tower and the actual 70-column story of, you know, steel turning to dust before your eyes.
Here we go again. This is the last tower to go down, which is I think...
Tower number 1, I think, went second, didn't it?
Yeah, is it tower number 1? Is that the one that was hit first?
It was hit first and went down second.
It went last,
yeah.
OK, tower 1. And we can see the spikes of steel there that were left standing briefly.
Yes, the next clip is slightly even clearer than this. He zooms in on camera on this particular clip, but then the next one you can see from a sort of sky as the background. Yeah, because that particular one had a dusty background, and this next one will have a sky as a background.
This is the best one of all, isn't it?
This one coming up after this, yeah.
Yeah. Oh, that's the one, yes.
And you'll
look at the speed of it. It's unbelievable, isn't it?
Yes. So really, I encourage people to go and study this for themselves.
Here we go. Let's just concentrate on these steels that are left standing, steel columns, that apparently, according to you, turn to dust.
Wow.
No longer is Chris.
There we go. Judy, we're just watching the steel that's left standing briefly turning to dust, or apparently turning to dust, as the second.
There's a particular moment when the outside edges of that are no longer discrete edges. And you'll notice when it becomes not, you know, a solid air interface, but it just becomes mist. It's pretty interesting.
It is quite extraordinary, isn't it, how that seemed to happen. I think we've also got some pictures, some still pictures of the, of the scene after the collapse, and it doesn't seem to be any debris, or very little debris. If we go to 9/11/010 picture, can we see that? 9/11/010. This is the scene after the buildings have collapsed. These are 110-story buildings, and there's not a lot there. And let's go to the next one as well, 011. Do you want to describe these, Judy?
It was 012. The next one is pretty amazing because that is the intersection where that debris was falling in the video. that we watched. The first video,
012. This is 012 now with the fire on the ground.
No, it's just paper. That's fumes off in the distance.
Yeah.
But there's just paper in that intersection. Where that guy is standing is where those big sections of building columns were landing, were aimed to be landing. And there's no building columns there.
But of course, a lot of people have said that they're in the basement, haven't they? But if we go to 911-018, can we see that one now, please? 911-018, please. Here we go. And this is the basement. So that's what do you think of that, Judy?
I think it's pretty interesting. There's a guy down there wading through water. There's puddles of water in the basement.
But weren't we told that there was molten steel down there?
Yeah, right. And that particular place where that guy is standing was marked on the map as being the hottest place in all of the WTC complex, according to the reported temperature charts. But that could not be hot if that guy is standing in water at that location.
Okay, I think we're done with that image now. Thank you. So, part of your theories about the towers is that they sort of bubble up before they collapse.
Well, that's really an observation rather than a theory.
Thank you, Andrew.
Okay, so why don't we look at, again, as you say, it's an observation, why don't we look at 911-034? Oh no, that's the wrong one. That's the free fall speed, isn't it, that picture? We don't want that one, we want 911-034, please. That's the one. Judy, do you want to describe this for us?
The building, the image on the left, I call it the bubbler because it looks like a drinking fountain, which in the Midwest we call a bubbler, where the building material is squirting up into froth and going up. That's not a collapse. The image on the right is Tower 2. Notice that about 2/3 of the building is gone. The black building in the foreground is 40 stories tall, which is approximately the height of the center of that snowball-looking dust cloud. But there's no building above that, and there's no debris below that. So, as this thing is supposedly coming down, where is the building? 2/3 is missing.
Okay, let me ask Andrew then. Can this not be explained by? Well, first of all, can it not be explained by jet fuel A in the planes that hit the towers? And second of all, if you reject that theory, then can it not be explained by the use of nanothermate or thermite?
No, because what you're actually seeing in that picture, if you look at it closely, is that essentially 2/3 of the building is gone. So if whoever is proposing the idea that a few thousand gallons of jet fuel can make 2/3 of a 110-story building disappear, or that some type of explosives can make 2/3 of the building disappear without any bright flashes, without any loud, huge explosive sounds, and without any heat.
Well, there's a famous film of the fireman saying it went pop, 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 pop.
Well, that's just somebody actually saying that's what happened. If you actually look at the pictures and look at the video record, yes, we do see some of these squibs coming out, but then if you analyse and study the evidence, you can see that there is another explanation for these squib effects than explosives actually being detonated, because the explosive being detonated does not tie up with the other evidence. We hear witnesses telling of explosive sounds, right, but they don't say they saw a bomb, and they also don't see these explosions actually happening as the towers are actually coming down.
Okay, well, we're getting lots of texts here. Let me read out a couple of texts. Andy in Leicester says, how do you explain the glowing angled cuts on the central columns? Also, the nanothermite chips in the dust. Judy, do you want to answer that one?
About the nanothermite or nanothermate, I forget what it's called nowadays. It's had various names over time. It's kind of morphed. And thermite, super thermite, spray-on thermite, nano-enhanced thermite, whatever it is. The latest has been thermitic material. Well, thermitic material, the main ingredients of thermite are aluminum powder and iron oxide.
Which is rust, isn't it?
Right, and the building is a steel structure with aluminum cladding that was turned to nanodust. So if you have nanodust, if the building's turned into nanodust, you better have aluminum powder and iron oxide in that dust, or else there's some mighty big explaining to do.
Okay. Actually, this is a question I've got for you. We will talk about the planes hitting the buildings in a minute, but the outside of the buildings, as I understand them, and correct me if I'm wrong, were steel columns covered with aluminium columns. Is that correct, or am I wrong?
It's like a steel column with aluminum tinfoil over it.
Right, so they looked how they looked, which was sort of decorative, but they were still nonetheless steel.
Yes.
Okay, all right, okay. So let me see if I can read a couple of...
I think it's interesting that the first text we got was about thermite.
Well, I think a lot of people are...
Yes.
You know,
yes.
they've made their choice,
yeah, they have.
Andrew, and it's kind of like... it's difficult for people, isn't it?
Well,
you come along and...
Just to mention, I had to make a special blog about thermite. It's called 911thermite3.blogspot.com. If people want to go and look at that blog at some other point, then they will find the evidence as to why it could not have been thermite that did anything important.
All right, TV Mad Max in Derby, I think it was Mad Max in Derby, says, why was the dust radioactive, was it?
The dust wasn't radioactive to my understanding. There are some traces of tritium. Dr. Wood may be able to elaborate on that slightly with the tritium.
Dr. Wood, was there radioactive material in the dust?
Not that I know of, and the small amounts of tritium that were measured, they're above normal, but they're not like a zillion times above it, which is what you would expect with a nuke.
Is tritium found in things like computer monitors and things like that?
It's also found with reactions of cold fusion.
Cell fusion?
Cold fusion.
Cold fusion.
Cold fusion, yeah.
This is another...
The radioactive, there may have been some radioactivity from smoke detectors, because smoke detectors do have a radioactive source in them to make them work. It's called americium or americium. I'm not sure how to pronounce it. Okay. So there may have been, because of the number of smoke detectors in the building, there may have been... Of
course, they're all radioactive, aren't they?
Yes. So that may be something, but there is no, there's no recognised large radioactive hazard in the dust that I'm aware of. That's never been documented anywhere to my knowledge.
Okay. So your entire premise then is that the buildings were turned entirely to dust. Does that include Building 7?
I don't see entirely. You can see the lower columns from the 18th story on down, there are some. So it isn't 100% turned to dust. But the majority of it did turn to dust. And this isn't really a premise. This is what the evidence shows. And, like, for example, the seismic signal, they've got an echo, and it's hard to talk over. The seismic signal was not consistent with a 102-story building slamming to the ground, but it's consistent with 18 stories, the lower 18 stories falling to the ground. So Building 7 is the most telling, which I thought was pretty interesting that NIST promoted a false choice, either thermite or bombs in the building or thermal expansion, their official story. Everything was set up for that either-or choice. But the argument that NIST used to discount bombs in the building also discounts their explanation. They said that video cameras set up north of Building 7 recorded low-level conversations down the street. They heard no loud noises. They heard no loud noises with 47-story building crashed to the ground a block away. What's wrong with this picture? And if you examine the seismic signal, it wasn't really distinguishable significantly above background noise. It was basically the seismic signal you would get with a jackhammer, not a 47-story building.
Okay. We seem to be having a few issues with your voice. On
the audio quality.
The audio quality, yes. I don't know whether you're too close to the mic or we have some...
I think it's a bandwidth problem on the Skype by the sounds of it.
Is it bandwidth?
Sounds like there's other traffic on the link or something at around.
Okay, well, I'm going to stick with Andrew for a few minutes, and then we'll come back to you, Judy, if I may.
Should I reconnect?
That's much better.
That's better now. That's fantastic now. That's much better. Let's get you back.
Okay.
Let's get you back then. I wanted to ask you, I wasn't quite clear what you said about Building 7. Are you saying that Building 7 was hit by a directed energy weapon and came down in the same way as Towers 1 and 2?
Let me define what I consider directed energy weapon. Energy that is directed and used as a weapon. It's not kinetic energy, such as a bomb or a missile, that's a kinetic energy device. A directed energy device uses an energy source of some type. And I believe it was, and all the evidence points to field effects and interference within the field. It's not like the derogatory statements made about my research as laser beams from outer space. No, it's field effects. It's energy fields. And it has a totally different signature than a kinetic energy device.
But are you saying that Building 7 was brought down by the same methods that you're saying Buildings 1 and 2 were brought down? I still don't think I got an answer for that.
Yes.
You are?
Yes, and even more so with Building 7. Building 7 shows it beyond any doubt whatsoever, clear as a bell. Pun intended. If you have a 47-story building slammed to the ground that doesn't have a corresponding seismic signal, what does that tell you?
That it's not hitting the ground, I suppose.
Exactly. If you had bombs in the building, controlled demolition, whatever you want to call it, or this explanation, which is thermal expansion, you have all this material that must slam to the ground. There's no evidence that material slammed to the ground. Okay,
I've got another text here which I think is worth reading out. Chaz in Nottingham says, isn't this just a distraction just to get the 9/11 truth movement arguing amongst themselves?
If I can...
I'm not part of the truth movement.
Really?
I'm just a researcher who looks at the evidence, independent of what other people think.
Okay.
I'm into the truth. I'm not into a popularity contest.
Okay. All right. Okay. I think we haven't got very long before the break. We'll come back and we'll look at some pictures of the site taken from above, which I think are quite interesting as well. But in the last sort of half a minute or so, Andrew, do you just want to talk a bit more about how the building collapsed and what actually happened? I mean, did it just blow away?
Well, I mean, basically, again, you just look at the pictures and you can see that it turned to dust. And you see, if you look at one of the main pictures, is the one where you look down the street and you see a carpet of dust littered with bits of paper. So again, if we've got hot explosions, then why have you got all this unburned paper? It just doesn't make any sense.
Well, it's quite, I mean, the whole buildings were full of paper, obviously, weren't they?
But, if it was burned down with jet fuel or with explosions, then why is that paper not ash?
And it seemed like everything else was
Everything
minute.
else was dust.
I remember seeing an interview at the time, and one of the rescue workers was saying that the largest thing he'd found was half a telephone keypad.
Yes,
with half the number buttons on it, and that was the biggest thing he'd found in the whole site. But we are going for a break now. If you'd like to text in your questions or comments for Andrew Johnson and Dr. Judy Wood, please do so now to 87778 with the word EDGE, and then your text. See you back here soon. Welcome back to On the Edge with me, Theo Chalmers, and my special guest in the studio, Andrew Johnson, and on Skype video from somewhere in the southern states of America, Dr. Judy Wood. I thought we'd go and have a look at some images. If we can go to 9/11/013, please. Okay, this is the holes left at the end of the collapse of the Twin Towers. Judy, if you're there, could you describe these for us, please?
Well, they're circular holes, and they're very regular in shape. In the upper right-hand corner of the image is Building 6. Just to the left of it should be a 110-story building, but you don't see any other debris around there. But you see in Building 6, it looks like multiple cylindrical holes have coalesced into one big void in the building. And scaling it, they're approximately 24 feet in diameter, multiple holes. And you start looking all around the site, and you will see holes in the street, holes in other buildings, and a building was sawed off in this.
Oh, you seem to have disappeared. Let's go to the next picture. Let's go to 014. Okay. Andrew, do you want to pick up on this?
Yeah, well, I mean, basically, you can see the circular holes in the building here, and as I think Judy said, you can see a void inside the building. I mean, again, if you actually look at that picture, you have to say, well, if something fell on top of this to make the hole, then why isn't that at the bottom of the hole? And well, you can see in relation to the actual contents of the building, there's virtually nothing in that void.
Well, let's look at the next picture then. Let's look at number 015. And this is looking inside World Trade Center number 6, and it's an 8-story hole.
Yeah, I mean, it's just basically straight down.
Where are the remains, it says, and I suppose we ought to ask that question, where are the remains?
Yeah, you're at ground level where that picture was taken.
Yes. You can count up 8 stories.
So your thesis, if you like, on this then, Judy, is that, once again, this is direct evidence of the disappearance of the materials. Is this correct?
We don't find the material here, so whatever explanation you come up with must incorporate that piece of evidence.
And presumably this photograph was taken very shortly after the collapse, and it's not, weeks later or something.
After the disappearance of the towers. Yes.
Okay. All right. Well, let's go to the next picture, number 16, please. Can we? Okay. This is This is World Trade Center 6 again. And the thing at the top of the screen, Judy, is that one of the side walls of one of the Twin Towers?
In the lower part of the screen, you see, I call them wheat checks, those outer prefab structures. You just see the outer wall remaining, and that's it. So
wheat checks is what? Is that some kind of breakfast cereal in America?
It looks like the breakfast cereal, the outer column.
Yeah, I think we have them knitted by nanas. I think they're called shreddies in the UK, but okay, well, you wouldn't know that, of course. But okay, so that's what you...
The building was shredded.
I think no one can argue with that. The building was certainly shredded. Okay, let's move on to the next one, which is number 17. Can we? This is an interesting shot. Andrew, do you want to tell us about this?
Well, I think really, again, you have to look at the devastation here and consider it how severe the devastation is. And again, you can see just above the sort of the green dome, you can see the...
Which looks immaculate, by the way.
Yeah, the green dome is untouched. So if a nuclear bomb had gone off, as some people claim, then why is the dome in pristine condition? If you had these huge fires and explosions, you'd expect some sort of debris to go onto the dome and damage that. But again, if you look at the actual outer walls of the World Trade Center there, where's the rest of the building, and how come you've just got those outer sections standing? Why haven't they been destroyed by whatever process destroyed the buildings as well?
Okay. All right. Let me read out a couple of texts. Pat from Ivy Bridge says, where would the energy have been directed from? Judy, where would it have come from, the energy? Would it be from space? Would it be from an aeroplane flying above? Would it be from another building, Building 7 perhaps? And then it was sort of turned on itself in a building suicide?
I haven't focused on where it comes from. I've been focusing on the evidence and what the evidence says. And it isn't again, I'm not proposing at all a ray beam from outer space. That is not what this is about. This is about an energy field, an interference of energy fields.
But if you're looking at those holes that we saw pictures of just now, they look like they're vertical. So doesn't that suggest, rather overwhelmingly, that either the energy weapon was underneath the buildings, pointing up, or above the buildings, pointing down, in which case, you know, I know people have suggested it might be something to do with HARP, which is the High Altitude Auroral Research Project, isn't it, in Alaska, which is a sort of thing that messes with the ionosphere. Is it HARP? Is it a satellite-based weapon?
I don't assign a name brand to anything. That's why I come up with my own vocabulary, because it avoids biasing our observations. I don't personally know what HARP is. I only know what they tell us it is. So to say it's HARP is just a shooting in the dark. It doesn't define what it is that occurred.
But
And it's like playing a multiple choice test. If you don't know what the answer is, how do you know you're given the right choices?
okay, but you have nonetheless made a connection with a weather event, haven't you? And HARP, a lot of people have said that HARP is a weather modification tool. And you have made a link with Hurricane Erin, haven't you? Do you want to tell us about Hurricane Erin? I'm trying to find the images here.
Yeah.
Got a lot of images.
There are a lot of images.
Can we?
If I could just say while we're doing that...
95. 95 is a good one to start with.
Yeah, 95. Image 95. Can we see that one?
I was studying the fumes. I'm not going to call it smoke. I'm not going to call it dust. I'm just calling it fumes. The fumes that were emerging from lower Manhattan. And if you notice in this picture, you have white-colored fumes headed south, which is to the left and downward in the image. And then you have blackish fumes going west.
Which is presumably smoke, is it? The black fumes are smoke?
I'm just calling it fumes. Just, different colored fumes. There are obviously different procedures, different events, different processes.
Could it not be that the black, what appears to be black fumes, is just the shadow of the white fumes?
Not by the way it's moving around.
Okay. All right.
It's above the ground level.
Well, let's go to the next image. Let's go to 96.
Yeah. So I was wanting to follow those up in the upper atmosphere. So I went looking for weather images, satellite images, and I came upon this image. And wait a minute, what is this doing there? If you notice, just to the left of this hurricane, you see Cape Cod. And you notice a little bit further to the left, there's Long Island. So this thing was right off the end of Long Island, and the outer bands of the hurricane were right over Cape Cod.
And Cape Cod is Massachusetts, isn't it? So it's just north of New York.
Yes, north and east. But you can see the outer cloud bands right on the tip of Long Island.
What's the connection with Hurricane Erin and what happened on 9/11, apart from it's very weird that nobody seems to talk about it and no one seems to know it was happening? What is the connection?
Again, I just look at evidence and see where the evidence falls. And you recall that I saw a lot of similarities, a one-to-one correlation with the evidence in New York City with the same thing with the Hutchison effect.
Let's look at the next image then. Can we? Then 97.
Okay.
Here we go. This is the early morning weather forecast on 9/11 on CBS. Your text there says, "Where is Erin?" It does seem extraordinary that there's no mention of the hurricane.
At least they say rough seas. ABC did not even say anything about rough seas or anything. They weather couldn't be better.
It's very. I mean, I was in New York once, actually in a hurricane that hit New York, and they evacuated downtown. They actually evacuated the World Trade Center, and there was no vehicles on the road at all, apart from a few very brave cabs and police cars and fire engines. Nobody else, and things were falling off buildings. The whole front of a theatre came off in Times Square when I was there, which was pretty scary.
And notice it's not, the concern wouldn't be that Hurricane Aaron was going to move over on top of Manhattan, but if it stalled out where it is, you have storm surges and Manhattan is at sea level.
Okay, let's have a look at the next one as well, 98. And here's another one with no mention of the hurricane, which we've seen in that picture, and that satellite picture was...
I'll just point out with that image, there are some circles that I put on there.
That's your circle?
Where it should be, yes. That wasn't on the original picture.
Okay, you've put that on there.
That's where it should have been.
It shows that patch of the ocean where the hurricane is, the patch of the ocean was visible in this map, but they chose not to put the hurricane icon on the map.
Because they talk about hurricanes all the time when they happen, don't they? Let's look at the next one. Let's look at 99. Here we go. This is a satellite image of... It looks like a big hurricane to me. I don't know. I mean, I'm not much of an expert on hurricanes, but... Andrew?
And it covers the whole eastern seaboard.
Yes, and I mean, we have got a clip, not in the programme, but taken from the International Space Station, where Frank Culbertson is describing the scene, actually, of the, fumes rising from the remains of the Twin Towers. And then he says, I'm looking up and down the East Coast to see if I can see anything else. And he doesn't even mention the hurricane, even though it must be well within his camera shot, because it's only, a few degrees off the actual shot he's looking at.
All right, let's look at number 99. No, sorry, let's look at 100, please. Judy, do you want to talk about this path of the hurricane?
The hurricane aimed for 4 days directly towards New York City. It
is that long diagonal line?
Right. It passed Bermuda and it revved up to a Category 3. That's the orange patch, the orange zone. And at 8 a.m., it was probably the closest to New York City, and it stopped, like it pulled up to a chalk line, turned around, and kind of made a U-turn, a 110-degree turn, and went east out of town that afternoon.
Well, okay.
Right.
I mean, are you actually saying, then, that... I mean, I know you keep saying that you're presenting the evidence and so on, but are you strongly suggesting that there is actually a link between this hurricane and the fact that people didn't talk about it as well, and what happened on 9/11?
I started looking at, okay, what do hurricanes do? And if you look at the next slide, number 101, you will see what the weather reports were at the 3 major airports surrounding Manhattan. They each reported thunder. Thunder at each of those 3 airports. Why is that significant? Thunder is what you get ahead of a storm system, because the electric potential difference between the clouds and the ground. People feel a storm coming. A lot of people with arthritis talk about knowing the storm's coming because of the way they feel. It's an electrical potential in the air.
It's like electrostatic, isn't it? It makes your hair stand up and things like that.
Yes. And exactly. You know how John Hutchison causes the effects in his samples? An electrostatic field and interfere with the radio frequency signal.
Okay, we will get to John Hutchison stuff, I assure you of that, everybody. And let's look at also, there are some very weird effects associated with hurricanes, aren't there? Let's look at the next image, 102, if we may. This is, Judy, again, do you want to describe these weird effects?
We have a 2x4 through a palm tree, and a piece of plywood through a palm tree, and then through a Russian study of straw through trees. You hear about straw through trees in hurricanes, and people assume it's because the stuff is traveling fast.
But that disobeys the laws, the third law of motion, Newton's law, doesn't it?
It's a different type of physics involved, where the straw goes into the tree. A lot of folks think it's sticking in because the tree splits open when it bends over. All sorts of bogus explanations. But when you start looking at it more carefully, you realize there's also a parallel with the Hutchison effect.
Well, there's some 2 little pictures in that image as well of Hutchison effect, isn't there?
Just one image, the bottom right.
Bottom right, sorry.
is the Hutchison one. The one in the middle at the bottom is a study of some samples some guy collected of straw and trees from hurricanes.
Oh, so they're pretty common then, aren't they?
Yes, and you also recall, cars sitting on telephone poles.
Well, that's the next one. Let's have a look at the next image, 103, please.
My favorite.
That's completely bizarre, that car sitting on a fence.
Yeah, I can't decide which way one wants to go. It's just sitting on the fence. It's under also a roof. It didn't tumble there. It's not scratched up. And there's a quote from an observer, I think it was a little over a year ago, who said, "I swear I could see cars floating in a storm he was in." Levitation is part of hurricanes and tornadoes. Folks have assumed it's wind, but this is evidence that this car did not tumble there. It had to be floating and then came down to gentle rest on that fence.
Okay, well let's look at the next image. Let's look at 104, where we've got strange effects on vehicles at 9/11.
And the upper left-hand corner, you got an upside-down police car. On the right-hand photo, you can't quite see it, it's cut off a bit, but there's an SUV that's totally toasted on the far right-hand edge, and then parked in front of it, in the center of the photo, is a car that's upside down. If you look at it more carefully in the lower picture, it's in pristine condition. On the underside, it's not at all toasted.
Okay, let's
go. We had cars that would either flipped or they were toasted.
Okay, we might as well run the next few pictures as well up there in the gallery, since we seem to be on a roll here with these images. Let's look at the next one, which is a field effect and Tesla coils. Now, Tesla coils is one of the things that John Hutchison uses, I believe.
Yes, controls the Vandegraaff generator.
Which is a very, very high voltage but low power, is that correct?
They make static electricity, static fields.
And there's a famous picture, isn't there, of Nikola Tesla surrounded by lightning hitting him, and it looks incredible, but it's pretty safe, apparently. Is that right?
I think so. I've not tried it myself.
Okay. Do you want to add something to that, Andrew?
Yeah, I think, really what we're showing that picture there for is to obviously draw the comparison between the shape of a Tesla coil, which has, a column in the middle, and then the charge builds up on the top. And that's actually very similar to the profile of a storm system. So the connection between Hurricane Erin and 9/11 is the field effects generated by the hurricane were similar to those generated by a Tesla coil, and coincidentally that ties up with the Hutchison effect again, as Judy has just said a few minutes ago, because John has used Tesla coils in his own experiments.
He has, hasn't he? Okay, let's read out a couple of text. Robin Wigan says, "It sounds like Dr. Wood just looks at evidence and doesn't really draw any clear conclusions. It's difficult to believe, in my opinion." I'm not quite sure what he means by that. I mean, Dr. Wood, do you want to pick up on that?
What's pretty funny is that I'm accused of only looking at evidence and not coming to any conclusions on one side, and the other side says she has no evidence and it's all speculation. You got to pick one or the other.
Well, I suppose if your evidence is strong enough that the buildings disappeared, then the other explanations must be wrong, I suppose. But that presupposes that your evidence is strong enough.
If you are the towers still there? One of the favorite statements of my detractors is to say that, well, there wasn't enough energy. You have to have so many kilovolts or whatever coming from outer space. There wasn't enough energy to destroy the towers. Well, yeah, there was. Are the towers still there?
So whatever the explanation, if it walks like a duck, quacks like a duck, it's a duck. Is that what you're saying?
I'm not saying which duck. I'm not saying what species, what particular,
Let's say mallard.
Yeah, I can't say if it's a mallard or if it's a mallard crossed with something else. But,
Okay, let's...
but I know it quacks like a duck and walks like a duck and swims like a duck.
Okay, well, let's look at some more evidence. Let's look at this magnetometer. Let's look at 106, if we can. This is a picture of magnetometer evidence from Alaska. Andrew, do you want to explain this?
Yeah, well, when Judy sent me this quite a while ago, to me it was a bit like the upturned cars that she'd found in the photographic record. It's a slam dunk, as they say in the States. This is I would like to say this is a smoking gun as far as I'm concerned.
What does it show?
Well, what it's actually showing is the Earth's magnetic field, and the Earth's magnetic field has been recorded digitally by some instruments in Alaska, and you can see that the Earth's magnetic field is changing on that picture, and it begins to dip. I don't know whether it's dipping north or dipping south, but it begins to dip at about 8:20 in the morning, and it reaches on that picture where I've drawn the arrow a minimum point at precisely 8:46 a.m.
And what exactly happened at 8:46 a.m.?
That was when the first tower got its hole. So for those that want to say that a plane crash, caused that hole, then how did it affect the Earth's magnetic field 20 minutes earlier, 3,500 miles away? Because you can see the dip recovers immediately following the appearance of the hole. And
is there any other magnetometer activity when the second tower is hit?
Yes, there is, but it becomes much more of a confused picture, possibly because if we can consider that the field effects of the weapon were being set going and set in motion, then whatever energy was being input at that time was causing much more complicated variations in the Earth's magnetic field. If you look at the trace for the whole day, I don't think I included that slide.
Hang on, because we add something where for 20 minutes you see all the signals trending downward, and they abruptly turn at that vertical blue line. That's when the North Tower gets its hole, and then they start trending upward. And notice when they get up and then go horizontal again. That's when the South Tower got its hole.
Oh, okay. So there is some apparent activity at the time when the first tower is hit, or gets its hole, as you say, and also at the time when the second tower is hit.
Yes, and if you look at the chart for the whole day, you will see that you basically start off with a flat line at around about 8 o'clock in the morning, and then about just after 6. Soon after Tower 7 had come down, the line levels out. But in between those two times, the trace is all over the place. Okay.
With reference to that image we showed of the smoke and the white fumes and the black fumes, Chris in Borough, I take that's Middlesbrough, says wind changes direction with altitude, hence the smoke going in different directions. Isn't that an explanation for it?
It may possibly just be that, but it's just to point out that it wasn't simply just a column of smoke. There was something else going on there.
Okay. Jim from Larne says, why so little mobile phone footage? Lots of people must have been filming the first tower when the second one was hit.
I think you'll find that there weren't very many phones equipped with video in 2001. Mobile phone video is much more.
Have to have, and yet, New York is a tourist-riddled city, isn't it?
Well, it is. I mean, but there are some amateur films that have come out. But again, if you go and that's a whole other area to go and study, really, to look at the amateur footage.
I mean, there is even one of the first tower being hit, isn't there? One amateur film.
Yes, there is one amateur film. Yeah,
it's very in the background and near a tunnel, isn't it? Near one of the tunnels under the river.
That's correct. Yes.
But so there is some other evidence of. I mean, we'll get back after the break and we'll talk about evidence for those being real planes or not being real planes. So you're sticking to that theory then that there were no planes, are you?
Well, the way I describe it is as follows, in that, it looked to some people like it was planes that hit the towers, but if we take that magnetometer evidence as one piece of evidence, and then we take the physical damage which is shown in the photographs, neither of those are consistent with a large blowing hitting the actual tower.
Yeah, and we will look at, the laws of physics, and obviously I'll ask Judy about that since she's a professor of mechanical engineering. But we are about to go to another break now. So once again, if you'd like to text in your questions or comments for Andrew Johnson and Dr. Judy Wood, please do so now to 87778 with the word EDGE, and we'll see you back here again very soon. Welcome back to On the Edge with me, with Andrew Johnson, and in America, Dr. Judy Wood. Okay, we're going to start, I think, with a little film of the holes being made in the second tower. If we can run that film, please. I don't know whether you want to talk over this, Andrew?
Yeah, well, so this is one of the classic shots that everyone's seen. And again, when I first saw this, you know, what's wrong with that? You know, it's a plane hitting a building, looks perfectly normal. But when you actually study it and analyse it frame by frame, as I've tried to do here, you get some very unusual views of it, really, because you've got this...
It doesn't appear to slow down,
No,
does
it doesn't appear to slow down, so there's no deceleration. But what struck me probably before that was if you've got this kerosene-filled plane, as I've put on the caption here, then why are you getting a large explosion coming out of the side? And if you think of the, you know, fuel being in the wings, then why isn't you getting an explosion from the wings? Because that's where the fuel is. As soon as the metal of the wing hits the metal of the building, you're going to get sparks generated from the friction of metal on metal. That will ignite the fuel pretty quickly, and the huge explosion should be at the front.
No, that's it, isn't it? That's the end of that, that clip.
And, you know, people describe this as a butter plane. The plane seems to melt into the building. I mean, again, if you replay that clip a few times, you'll see there's all kinds of problems with it.
Well, let's play it again. Let's play that clip again, can we? Can we play
so it's worth just looking at it frame by frame just to check that I'm not trying to, you know, pull your leg and, you know...
Okay. Judy, you can see this, can't you? Can you talk about this as well?
In my strength and materials class, when I introduce the idea of shear stress, I play a series of Wile E. Coyote videos, you know, impossible physics. And one particular one, the coyote holds up an Acme steel plate to stop the roadrunner, and you see a big bush fly through, then the coyote checks the steel plate and has a silhouette, a passage of a, you know, cut out of a roadrunner. That's just what we saw on 9/11. It looks just like the Roadrunner physics.
So you're saying that this image defies Newtonian physics, the third law of physics, that each action has an equal and opposite reaction, and therefore the plane should slow down, should partly bounce off, wouldn't be able to cut through the steel columns? Is that what you're saying?
No, I'm not talking about which is going to fail first, but you're going to have an impact of things. And think of Greg Louganis doing a perfect dive. This is even better. This is like a splashless dive.
I'm sorry, this is like
high dive.
A high dive.
Yeah, splashless dive where you go into the pool without any, you know, splash coming out of the water.
Oh, I see. Okay, that's a good example, actually, isn't it? Yeah, if you dive into the water reacts, doesn't it? It responds by bouncing up.
Yes, yeah. You know, I mean, as I describe it with that image, as other people have described to me, I make a couple of analogies. The first one is a Formula One racing car. What happens when a Formula One racing car crashes into the barriers? It crumples up, and the forward motion, if it crashes in at an angle, is turned into rotational motion, and it spins round. So unless that plane, you know, was super strong and crashed directly into the building...
Which it didn't. It wasn't in a straight line, was it?
No, it wasn't a straight line. So it should have skewed round, the tail should have broken off and fallen to the ground, and that didn't happen either. So, you know, you can look at that image for maybe 20 minutes and find all kinds of things wrong with it.
Well, let's look at image number 3, 003, can we? This is the nice little plane-shaped hole that it made. Judy, do you want to pick up on this?
The wingspan isn't as large as an airplane. The wingtip of an airplane is about 5 inches in depth. And look at that upper slot that it cut. Your steel column. That was one of the things I had a big problem with on the very first day. Was, you know, how does that wingtip, and you know, I have a dentist who couldn't understand about why the buildings went away, but he has jumped out of his, in the reserves, and has jumped out of airplanes. And this idea of airplane wings cutting the building like this, he remembers you don't step on the wing when you jump out of an airplane.
Okay, so there's an image of a woman, isn't there, standing in the hole here that you've highlighted. What's the reason for that?
Well, I highlighted that, and that image is of a woman called Edna Sintron. Now, of course, if you imagine
She's been identified.
Yes, yes.
I didn't realise that.
Yes.
I have seen this image, but she's waving, isn't she?
Yes, you can see there is some video of her waving, which means, you know, she's pretty okay, she's not injured, she's sort of...
And there's no, obviously, blazing fire hot enough to kill her.
Theo, you took the words right out of my mouth. If you say that there was either explosives planted there or a plane crashed there with a hot fire, this is what, you know... less than an hour
we saw
after
a blast, didn't we? We saw
some kind of blast.
Kerosene,
yes, but
jet fuel A coming out.
Yes, we did.
Paraffin.
One of the bits of evidence we haven't covered is the weird fires. We haven't touched on that yet.
We haven't. No.
And why I bring that up is because the lady standing there is obviously not, you know, whatever she's holding on to is hot enough not to burn her. It was cool enough not to burn her, I should say. So where did the heat go?
Although there were people who jumped to their deaths.
Yes, there were.
A lot of people.
There were. But we don't know whether they were jumping because they were burned.
Well, come on. You're not going to jump unless you have to jump, are you?
We don't even know if they jumped.
Well, you're not suggesting they were pushed, are you, or fell?
No, we don't know how they went out. They went out of the building. Is all we can really be certain of.
Okay. Now, in that image, it appeared that the plane went into the hole completely and disappeared completely. And in the Norday brothers film of the first impact, that also appears to be the case. And yet there was some wreckage on the ground. If we can go to image 4, the next image, and this is an aeroplane tyre, obviously not a car or truck tyre.
This is fascinating. Notice the picture on the right. See the axle? See how it has a spiral pattern to the failure surface? That implies a torsional failure.
And what exactly is a torsional failure? Is that twisting?
Yes, like a craft that propagated in torsion. Like from one too many landings with the brakes on.
Uh-huh. Okay. So, well, couldn't that be caused by hitting a building?
Hitting a building is not a twisting action.
And of course, the wheels weren't deployed, were they? They were
Exactly.
Apparently they were stored in the undercarriage.
Right. And why do we have just wheels that were stored in the undercarriage, and we don't have snack carts, luggage, seats? You know, there's a lot of other parts to an airplane.
There was nothing, was there? Nothing else of an aeroplane. There was some on the building roof, wasn't there?
Yeah, there was another portion. But also in that image there, you can notice that the tyre looks as if it's inflated. So I point out to people that if this is meant to have come out of a plane crash, then how come the tyre is inflated? How come that tyre is not showing any signs of charring or burning or melting or whatever? Because we saw this huge conflagration and a huge fireball, and yet that tyre, you know, people talk about the passport of Satan al-Sakawi, or I forget if that's his correct name, but why aren't they talking about the rubber on this tyre?
Well, it does seem quite strange that, you know, I mean, I suppose it's possible, though, that it bounced out of the building.
Well, you know, everything's possible, but is it likely? I mean, look at the image. I mean, how is that going to survive from that sort of? If we take that first impact shot by Michael Herzakani, and we imagine that the other plane impact was similar, how is something like that wreckage going to survive like that? And there's also a picture of an engine, which is the wrong sort of engine, under some scaffolding. And so how did it land under the scaffolding? You know, did it just bounce there when there's no scrape marks on the pavement? You know, I mean, all kinds of things.
Okay, so we've seen a fireball, we've seen somebody standing in the opening, and we've seen other images of the collapse. I think perhaps we should go back a bit more to this justification thing. If we can go to image number 35, can we do that? There we go. Yes, Judy, can you talk about these?
Yes, the image on the left, I call Alka-Seltzer, or shaving cream. It looks like, you know, shaving cream squirting out of a can or an Alka-Seltzer tablet dissolving in water. I don't know if you have Alka-Seltzer.
We do, yeah, we do.
This is not just, you know, a dusty windowsill that's falling and trailing dust. This is opaque dust. This is, and if you notice the ground, after that piece has gone away, it is not on the ground. It dissolves in the air before it hits the ground.
Okay, well, talking about that, we're looking at the still image next, 36, which is those spikes we saw in the moving image, apparently turning to dust. These are the 70 stories, is it?
70 stories of unsupported steel.
Which were from the central columns, or were they from the outside columns?
I'm not sure myself. I don't know if
They're core columns.
They are core columns, because there were 47 separate massive steel columns in the centre of the Twin Towers. Is that correct?
47, yeah, in the core columns. And did you know that 14 people survived at the base of those columns?
I knew a few survived. There were a couple of police, I believe, who survived. I didn't know there were 14.
In Stairwell B.
14, was it?
there's actually a documentary about Stairwell B, yes, and they describe their story.
Yeah.
I believe these core columns that you see are Stairwell B, or above Stairwell B.
And these are the original photographs, still photographs taken of those spikes of steel. But, you know, Andrew, what do you see in that one on the right?
Well, the one on the right, in the far right, you can see it's turned to dust, as far as I'm concerned. I mean, you know, people want to, you know, say, no, that didn't happen, or it's just the rest of the dust, you know, from the main collapse and things like that. But to me, it looks like in the left-hand picture we've got structure, we've got bits of steel, you know, in a grid, and in the right-hand picture we've got dust. It's
collapsed a bit, but it's not disappeared, has it?
No. And those, you know, as you saw on the video clip, that picture sequence spans perhaps 7-8 seconds, something like that.
If those things had tipped over, they would have taken out a couple of city blocks of buildings.
Okay.
You know, they would have sliced through adjacent buildings and damaged adjacent buildings.
Let's look at number 37 then. Let's look at that image. Okay, this is a kind of weird, what is it, like you describe this as a lathering up effect, Judy?
Yeah, it looks like somebody, in the shower lathering up. It's just this dense fumes coming out of just one face of the building.
And what do you suppose caused that?
I've come to see it as the building turning into dust. It didn't just turn into dust in 10 seconds. It turned into dust over a period of an hour. And for Building 7, it turned into dust all afternoon. So there was nothing left to crash to the ground.
But there was some height left, wasn't there, in Building 7, more than in the Twin Towers? Is that correct?
Yeah, there was the outer facade left. But the strength of the structure and the solid mass, the majority of it turned to dust. If you look at the volume of stuff, like even in this picture, the volume of material, this is opaque. It's dense stuff coming out of the building. That doesn't come from nowhere. It removes mass of the building when it comes out.
All right, let's look at the next one, can we please? This is number 39. This is more of your one-sided lathering up. Do you think this is telling us, I mean, let's assume for a minute that there was a directed energy weapon or energy weapons used on these buildings. Does the face that is lathering up suggest where the direction of the energy weapon was, or the field effect was directed from, or however you want to describe it?
Well, if you look at this image, both images, and look at the pattern in the fumes, you can see they have particular directions.
Well, they do seem to be on one face of the building, don't they?
Like the figure on the right, you see them angling upward from the lower part.
Yeah.
Parallel, going up, and then up to the top, they're kind of going downward, and out of that dark zone, they're going horizontally.
So what you're saying is, what you've just said, or a few minutes ago said, is that you think that the buildings, all three of them, were beginning to dissolve, if you like, for quite a long time before they actually collapsed.
Before they went away, yes.
Before they went away?
Yes, they were getting weakened, the structure was coming apart. And there are witnesses that talk about, one of the firefighters was coming down from Tower 1 and came upon this, totally fume-filled third floor. And he knew it wasn't smoke. It was just dust, he thought, but it was completely dense. You could see no light whatsoever. It just totally blacked out all light.
Okay. Let's look at the next one. Let's look at number 40, please. Is there any significance in this? The
glowing floor, the entire floor is glowing, but there's no apparent fire, coming out those windows. And also the fumes, the dark fumes on the right, at the lowest part, not the ones at the top of the building, but it looks intermittent, almost like blowing smoke rings.
Okay. All right. Let's leave those images for a moment, and let's get back just to the idea of the planes. I think a lot of people are disturbed by the idea that the planes didn't exist. I'm sure you're familiar with Occam's razor. Isn't the most simple explanation, the least complicated explanation, the best explanation? I mean, Andrew, what do you think? Well,
I think that only works if you ignore evidence. In other words, if you come up with evidence that doesn't fit the Occam's razor explanation, then you have to say, Occam's razor is not applicable. Occam's razor is blunt. We need another instrument to apply here.
I reiterate what Occam's razor is. The interpretation I go with is that it is making the least number of assumptions.
That's correct. Yes, but it's often used to say that the simple explanation is the one. I mean, why make it more complicated?
Here, making the least number of assumptions means you take in the most amount of evidence, and you count for all the evidence. You're not making any assumptions. So therefore, Occam's razor is to look at all the evidence.
But there are several films from different angles, certainly of the second tower being hit by a plane. So are you saying then, if that cannot be the case, that all of those films are fake?
I don't know what happened. I don't know exactly how it came to be, but there's no evidence of an airplane having hit a normal building.
If I can add to that,
yeah.
It's things are not as they appear. I did a study into 500 witness accounts. You can download this. All the data that I used is downloadable from my website. You can go and read the accounts yourself if you wish. They were published on the New York Times website. So if we take the witness accounts, we get some interesting things coming out. For example, we have two fellows stood next to each other when the second quote-unquote plane hit. And one says to the other, "Oh, a plane just hit." And the guy next to him says, "No, that wasn't just an explosion. There wasn't a plane." And then you have people saying, "I never realised that a plane had crashed here until I got home and saw it on the television." There's various accounts like that. And actually, when you count through all these accounts, I isolated that there were 117 first responders at or near the World Trade Center when the second plane hit. And if you count up all of those who reported seeing the plane hit the tower, only I think 20 of them reported seeing it. So that was, I think it was 21%, I think, overall of those witnesses, and only 20% reported hearing the plane. And then only 8% reported seeing and hearing the plane. And these are people who were actually at the site, not looking from their apartment half a mile away. They were actually there. And then one guy, for example, he says he's looking up, I think he's going in towards the tower, and he's looking up, and he sees the plane hitting the tower, and he says he doesn't hear any sound. He says, "I'm looking up at the fireball, but I never heard the motor of the plane." Okay, I mean, there are amateur films of 9/11, quite a few. How is it that, let's assume then that the people who planned this faked some film, if either during, before or after the event, and gave it out to the news media of a plane hitting the second tower, and then the first film also, the Norday Brothers film, was also fake. Let us assume that for a moment. Why is there no amateur footage showing the explosion but no plane hitting? Because there isn't one, is there? Yes, so there are. If you look at the amateur footage, they all show all kinds of things. In fact, you see some amateur footage where the plane impact has actually been cut out, and you just get the immediate shot before and the immediate shot after. There are a couple of clips like that. I think.
Well, I've seen one like that, but it doesn't appear. It's just that they've lost interest for a moment and turn the camera off.
If you look at the amateur video clips as a whole set, there are a lot of anomalies in them, and that's something that each person is going to have to study for themselves rather than take my word for it. Right. You have to do the legwork to look at the actual clips. What I will say is, to my knowledge, if you look at what the news networks have got, if we've got this huge, plane crash happened on Tower 1, we have all the news networks going down there with their camera crews and whatnot. They should have 20 films from the news media themselves of the second plane hitting. From the ground, there is no footage from the news media of the second plane hitting in the tower, not from the ground. The only shots we have are a couple from the air. So that is very peculiar. And then we have the testimony of David Hansher, which is a very interesting one, where he says he's actually trying to photograph. He looks up and he says he hears the explosion, he hears a buzzing sound that he doesn't report hearing a plane, takes a picture, and on that picture there is no plane. You can see his picture. It's from the New York Daily News.
Well, perhaps he missed it. I think we need to go to the Hutchison pictures now before we go to the next break, and then we'll talk about the other effects on the ground around the tower. So if we can go to Hutchison 1 and slowly scroll through them. Judy, would you like to talk about these images, please?
I'm not sure which Hutchison 1.
Yeah, she hasn't got these because you chose these yourself. So.
Oh, okay.
I can see them on the screen.
Good, yes.
This one is a piece of a bar of aluminum. It's about 3 inches wide and 1.5 inches deep, and it has a penny in it, embedded in it.
Okay. Let's go to the next one. I think there's another one of the same coin, number 2.
I'm not familiar with that image.
Okay. Number 3. Number 3. Okay, this looks like what we call aluminium, but you call aluminum.
Yeah, John calls it aluminium. It's aluminum that's split open, and the split parts are sharp.
But it's very unnatural.
How does that happen?
Yeah, okay, let's go to number 4.
Actually, these samples were sent to a metallurgist at University of Texas to figure out how these things got to how they are, what happened to them. And the metallurgist, professor, said he has no idea and could never reproduce that himself. He has no idea what caused that effect. And with every method known to him, he's never seen anything like this.
Okay, number 5, please. And and also we'll go straight to number 6 because they're quite similar, aren't they? And then why don't we go to number 9 after that? Number 9. Now these are bars of metal. Is this very heavy steel? Is this?
Yeah, this is stainless steel, and what is interesting about it is a magnet is not attracted to the ends, but in the middle where it was affected, a magnet will be drawn to it.
Okay.
Yes, it's magnetized in the middle.
Okay. Number 10. What is this? Is this the end of a bar that's got sort of...
I've not seen this image before, so I don't know what that is.
All right. One of the we will show a film after the break, but there are some films of things like levitation and things being levitated, because there was some evidence of some kinds of levitation at the World Trade Center. Was that correct, Judy?
Yes, you get lift or disruption with the Hutchison effect, and at the World Trade Center, you have cars that are toasted or cars that are flipped, one or the other, not both.
Oh, I see. They either get toasted or they... Let's go to 41, 911-041. Can we see that image quickly? Here's an example of a car that... Do you want to describe this?
Toasted car.
Toasted car. So the tyres are still... The back tyre is still full, but the front of it looks like it's melted. And this is...
The car's gone, right. And the surrounds around the windows frames are just flopped over.
And let's go to the next one, 42.
This one is very important. Notice that round unburned spot. The back of the car looks like it still
Judy,
has a
I'm going to have to
strap.
break in here because we're going to go for another break. Once again,
Okay.
please text in your questions or comments to Andrew Johnson and Dr. Judy Wood to 87778 with the word EDGE. See you back here soon. Welcome back to On the Edge with me, Theo Chalmers, and my special guest, Andrew Johnson, in the studio, and Dr. Judy Wood, somewhere in the southern states of the USA. Just before we went to the break then, we were looking at a picture that Judy Wood was describing for us. If we can go back to that image, and let's see if we can get Judy Wood to carry on with her description. That's the one. Judy, are you there?
Yes, can you hear me?
Oh dear.
We can hear you, only just though.
Hello?
Oh.
That's better.
Oh, there we go. We got you.
Okay. This was one of my big aha moments.
Okay.
The other side of this car is really dramatic. You can see the back end is in pristine condition, like a new wax job on it, and the front is totally toasted. Where that arrow is pointing, there's a circular spot on the side of that door that doesn't appear to be toasted, but all around it is, with an abrupt margin, between toasted and not toasted.
It sort of does look like someone's done it with a flamethrower or something, like a welding torch or something, doesn't it?
If you've ever developed, pictures, done any photography in the darkroom,
I have actually.
when you make a contact print, there's something that blocks light, something that allows light to go through, and you get an abrupt break between light and no light. That's what that reminds me of.
I think that's called dodging and burning, if I remember correctly, but I'm not too sure.
Right, a lot of dodging.
Yeah, a lot of dodging, yeah.
This helped me realize that we had some interferometry involved. That's interferometry of different kinds of energy fields would produce that.
Okay, let's look at a few more then. Let's look at the next one, which is 43. Judy, do you want to describe this one?
This is the inside of the police car. I think the same one. It's totally toasted. And the back, remember, had the new wax job. Notice that hump of the drive shaft between the two front seats.
Uh-huh.
It has little pinholes through the metal. The metal looks like Swiss cheese.
So it's rusted through in clearly, a very short space of time.
This photograph was taken on the 12th of September.
Okay, so the next day.
How could it be rusted through like that?
It just seems strange, doesn't it? Let's go to the next one, 44. This is burned out cars. They all seem to have their missing door handles. Is there a reason for that? Is it because they're different metal or plastic?
It's a different type of material. And there's a difference between this and regular car fires. Look at the windshield, or where the windshield was. Everything is gone, almost like it was wire brushed ready for a paint job, all around the lip of where the windshield goes.
Yeah, because if there is a burned out car, I mean, the rubber around the glass would turn into a sort of glue, wouldn't it, and look like a sticky mass.
And you'd have fragments of glass here and there. You wouldn't have 100% of the glass missing.
Okay, let's look at the next one.
And also, notice in that picture, you have trees with leaves on them in the background.
Okay.
Everything all the cars were toasted, but none of the trees were.
Okay. Now, this is some other, Hutchison type effect, if you like. Do you want to describe this one, the windows?
You have double pane windows where only the outer pane is broken. And the inner pane and outer pane have different breakage patterns. If you throw a baseball through a window, you get a spiderweb pattern, starburst kind of breakage pattern. You don't also get round holes. We have round holes in some of them. But the fact that you have outer pane broken and not the inner pane needs some explaining.
Okay, all right. Let's look at the Bankers Trust building. The next one is quite interesting, isn't it? This is number 50. This is the building that was opposite the World Trade Center, and it had a big hole carved in it somehow. Do you want to talk about this, Judy?
Yeah, it's missing material there. It's got this big void in it. And that wheat check's hanging there. It couldn't have done it. It's straight as an arrow. It's not scratched or bent up or, he couldn't have carved that big hole.
And yet this building, this is the Bankers Trust building, isn't it? This was repaired after 9/11 and then demolished.
Yes.
Do you know why it was demolished?
They said it was infected.
With
A
what?
steel frame building is infected.
With a mould infection. That was the official explanation.
I think we should show your film of Andrew that you took it in 2008. Can we see the film we added last of all of the hosing down of? This is a very recent film, the start of 2008, of them hosing down the 9/11 site, the World Trade Center site, even today. You want to describe this, Andrew?
Yeah, well, this was actually taken from the Burger King upstairs on Liberty Street, and we just happened to go, and we were trying to film the site, but they had all fences around it. We couldn't really film much, and then just as lo and behold, as we're sitting down to have a bite to eat on this cold day in January, this was the 17th of January 2008, I took this video, we can see this guy hosing down this, I don't know whether it's a cable or some other type of pipe. So why is he hosing that down? I mean, why do you need to hose it down like that and give it such a good wash? It didn't really make any sense to me.
And they're still hosing down the site.
Yeah, while we're there, they're hosing down the entrance to the site, and they were hosing down the wheels of the trucks as they entered and left the site.
And isn't it the case that they're also bringing in soil in?
Yeah, they were actually bringing in trucks of what looked like soil or potting compost into the complex, and I didn't see them taking the trucks in when I was there, but I saw them coming out full of this, sort of muddy, soily material.
Can we go to number 60? Oh, Judy, I think we've lost you there. Can we go to number 60?
Yeah.
Image 60, please. Here we go. What are you seeing in this then?
As they started taking the building apart, Bankers Trust, they got down to the area where it had been repaired.
Yeah?
And, hang on, I got a cough.
Yeah, so basically you can see the actual, if you look closely in this picture, you can see the sort of potting compost actually placed on top of the, there's actually a fire truck here somewhere, and that's got potting soil on it. They've got bits of rubbish in here.
And the next one, let's look at the next image.
Yeah, and here you can see there's actually soil on top of the debris. So how did this sort of soil or landfill type material get on top of the debris? And was the World Trade Center full of soil?
And the next one?
And this was September 2007, as you can see from the caption. And, where is this?
Scooping up what looks like
topsoil.
And then in the next picture, in 63, we've got 4 big trucks. What are they carrying here?
They're actually carrying soil-type material again. And this was, I think...
This was a week later, a week after 9/11, and they're just north of the World Trade Center complex.
And what are they doing? Let's look at the next image as well. What are they doing then? Are you suggesting, and I know you are suggesting this, so I'm going to say it for you, that they're bringing in soil, spreading it around, and taking it out as though it was some kind of decontamination? Is that correct?
Just look at the truck, not the green one, but all the other ones in front. They look like nice rounded bread loaves in the back of each of those trucks of soil, brown soil.
So
why would they be taking out soil like that?
So are you saying then that this effect, if it is the Hutchison effect, and I think I should say here that John Hutchison is a Canadian who would have been on this show but unfortunately can't be tonight, but he's an independent scientist, and we've seen some of his effects. We do have a couple of films. I don't know whether we're going to have time to show them, but they're all available on his website and on other websites, and you can find those on the edgemediatv.com forum. They're all listed there on this subject. Sorry, just to get back to the topic here, then, this is an ongoing problem. There is some kind of contamination of the site. Is this what you're saying, Judy?
Yes, recall, I had categorized all the evidence before I found the Hutchison effect. And one of the first things that grabbed me of the Hutchison effect was a statement someone made about if it's too large of a mass that is activated, it may not be self-quenching. It may be an ongoing effect that
Okay.
gets started.
One of the effects is rusting, isn't it?
Yes, instant rust.
Let's go to the next image, 65, please. Okay. Judy, do you want to talk about this?
Yes, on the left, that's a FEMA image taken, and you get pipes that are uniform colored in rust, orange rust. Steel does not rust like that. Steel gets creeping crowd on all sorts of different things over a long period of time.
And the next
The only
image?
thing I know of that rusts like that is iron. Like you take an iron skillet, leave it in your sink with water standing in it, it'll rust like that.
Okay, let's look at the next image, 66, please. Perhaps, Andrew, you want to talk about this for a moment?
Yeah, so it looks like here, you know, as I've put in the caption, you've got instant rusting. You know, does fire cause instant rust? We've got these clouds of rust. It looks
Clouds
like
of orange, it does look like rust, but could it not be thermite, which is made of rust?
Well, if it was thermite, I think the people who are, you know, the diggers that are working there just wouldn't be there because they wouldn't work. So, you know, the thermite doesn't explain anything.
Well, there's a good one, and I think we'll go to number 68. Can we get a picture 68? Let's skip one. This is the Bankers Trust building being taken apart, and Judy, I mean, what do you see here?
And this is the area where they repaired it, with that big gash in it. They repaired it, and then now they're taking it apart, and it looks like the steel where they replaced it has been at the bottom of the ocean for 100 years.
Yeah, I mean, you're a professor of mechanical engineering. Would you expect to see this kind of rusting in a building of this type?
No.
What, never, ever?
No. Steel is made of various properties in it that enhance its structural properties and its rust-resistant properties.
And the next one, the next image?
So you've got, more rusty beams.
Where is this? Is this Bankers Trust building again?
Correct.
Yes, yes.
Okay. All right, let's look at some more sort of Hutchison effect type things. Let's look at number 71. This is a firefighter walking through the fire, but apparently not on fire.
Yeah,
and neither is the paper.
So it seems like the Hutchison effect doesn't affect paper, and yet it apparently affects lots of other things, but usually metal things.
Primarily, yes.
Here's something that we all know about is a microwave oven. You put a dry paper towel in there and put your coffee mug on it. The paper towel does not cook.
That's because it's not oily or wet, is that right?
Correct, because that particular energy, microwave, resonates the water molecules, not paper. So different energy affects different materials differently.
Is it because metal is conductive of both heat and...
It's for different reasons, really. I mean, the frequency of the microwaves is resonant with something to do with the water molecule and also with molecules that are in fats and this sort of thing. So the microwave causes the molecule to vibrate, which generates the heat in the material.
Doesn't John Hutchison, to get his effect, use sort of cross beams of radar energy and microwave energy?
He does,
correct?
yes. But it also depends on the power and the frequency as to which, particular frequencies he uses to generate particular effects that he does. And I mean, we'd really need him here to, sort of elaborate on that some more.
But they're all available on his website. Once again, if you want to go to our website, which is edgemediatv.com, go to the forum and go to the On the Edge subject. You'll see tonight's show, and all the websites are listed, and there it is on screen.
I'd just like to add, with the fires there, we're looking at, you'd look at that picture and you'd think that it's just an ordinary fire. But if it was an ordinary fire, then again, why is the fireman apparently walking through it? And why isn't the paper, just a whole mass of burning paper? I mean, the fire should spread from one piece to another in dry conditions. Okay,
let me see if I've got some interesting texts here. I'm afraid P. Nesshead in Aberdeen says, I'm an open-minded guy, but this sounds utterly insane. I mean, I know you're fighting this kind of criticism. I mean, Andrew, you must have people saying this.
Well, I mean, I think it's one thing to say this sounds insane, but what I would challenge anyone to do is explain this evidence. If you are saying that what we're putting on the table is not the correct explanation, in other words, that explanation being that the World Trade Center was destroyed using some type of undisclosed weaponry, which uses a technology which is similar to what John Hutchison has developed, then you have to come up with another explanation. And all the other explanations that I've come across do not explain this evidence.
Well,
it's
Jeff,
as simple as that.
Somebody called Jeff says, rust can appear in hours. Look at your brake discs after the rain.
Well, I don't think brake discs are made out of steel, and as far as we know, there weren't the World Trade Center things near the World Trade Center. Things near the World Trade Center weren't being used as brakes when the event happened. I mean, you know, if I can make that fairly obvious observation, I think that answers that question.
Okay. We did have a text that scrolled off the screen now, which said something like, you know, God help us if the powers that be have got this technology, because we're 10 years down the line now. I mean, but where else are they using it? Where has it been used? Has it been used anywhere else? If you're saying there's directed energy weapons, I mean, let's get Judy to answer this. Judy, you know, is this technology being used? Have you got evidence of it being used anywhere else?
There are other odd events. There's one particular one I observed in 2007. On the 1st of August, the Minnesota Bridge, it supposedly was closed down for repair, so it had less traffic on it. Half the bridge was closed, so it had half the load it normally has. Suddenly, you know, a dozen supports suddenly failed at the exact same moment, and the roadway went down horizontally, so the cars rode the bridge down, and when it landed in the riverbed, people got out of the cars and stood there on the bridge. It makes no sense through physics, but also all of the other hallmarks that we saw on 9/11, the fuming, the weird fires, you know, the list goes on.
Okay, now,
protected.
all right, now I know you have taken some legal action, because you're not just talking about this, you have actually taken some legal action. You've done something called a key tam. Do you want to describe this, please, Judy?
Yes, the key tam case is called a whistleblower case. My act of whistleblowing was my request for correction I filed with NIST, National Institute of Science and Technology, notifying them that the contractors they hired to help with their report were manufacturers and developers of directed energy weapons, and also were contracted to know everything about any weapon of mass destruction that existed on the planet or off the planet. So they would know what they were looking at. And that's a conflict of interest, for one thing. Another thing is, some of the contractors had actually tested a mock-up of an entire floor of the building and put it on fire for twice as long, at twice as high of temperature, and they could not get it to fail. Yet they signed a report stating that fire caused it.
So your legal action, which was what, in the High Court in America, is that the equivalent of
Supreme Court?
Supreme Court. Actually went to the Supreme Court. Was to ask for a correction to the NIST report on what happened. Is that
No, my request for correction to the NIST report was my act of whistleblowing, was notifying a government agency of the fraud that had been, the science fraud that was in that report, and the involvement of the contractors. The key tam case was against the contractors.
And anyone in America is allowed to do that, aren't they?
Yes, as citizens to file these charges. The key tam case allows there to be checks and balances, supposedly, that these companies were defrauding the American people. American taxpayers paid for the NIST investigation. Instead, they got a report of science fraud. So therefore, we want our money back.
Okay, so you brought this case. It went eventually to the Supreme Court. What happened?
It went to the first court, dismissed it based on stuff that was not in the report. He said he was not going to hear a case on who shot JFK or what landed on the moon. My case isn't about those. He, didn't read any of the evidence. It was a very poorly written decision. We appealed it to the Court of Appeals. The Court of Appeals, meanwhile, a law had changed that made it easier for my case to go forward. And it was such a good change in the laws for accountability that the judges had to ignore the law in order to dismiss the case, and they actually stated that in the write-up. They stated for the ease of preparing this dismissal, they were going to ignore that law. And so
well, they ignored the
yes.
current law.
Yes, it's called the FERA Act. Yes.
So they made a decision based on a law that was no longer the law. Is that what
well, essentially, the law was enhanced, but they said we're going to ignore the enhancement in ruling on this case. And they actually said that in the ruling.
Well, I probably shouldn't ask you this, but Judy, is this legal in America?
No. And what this shows is that we're no longer a country based on laws.
And that was the basis on which to send the case to the Supreme Court, was that the appeals court ignored the change in the law in order to make their ruling. And the evidence has never really, the evidence that we've described has not been discussed in a legal, situation. It's never been, put before a jury. So
where are you now with it then, Judy?
It's dead. It's ended. What this law is that for a government agency, for contractors to knowingly allow fraudulent evidence or fraudulent data to be put forward into a report, they are held accountable. And I had absolute proof that these contractors knew they were allowing fraudulent data to move forward.
So where can you go now then? Can you not appeal again?
No, that's it. The United States Supreme Court is as high up as you go. And that was our chance. For people who wanted to expose 9/11, that was the opportunity. And the quote truth movement, for whatever reason, decided to sweep that under the carpet. They do not want truth and justice.
I think it's very worthwhile pointing that out, that this court case has been in progress since 2007, and yet I've asked people who talk about 9/11 at these various events and talks. I've asked people to mention the court case, to raise awareness of it, and they refused, point blank refused.
Oh, well, I can see you're angry about it.
Yes, well, I think because one thing we haven't really touched on is why this is important. I mean, we don't just do this for entertainment. We don't just do this because, we think it's fun. This is one of the most crucial matters that's set before humanity, because what we have proved with this evidence tonight is that the tower has disappeared in a very unconventional manner, without any heat, without any real explosions as such, not in the conventional sense anyway. So we're looking at a new type of technology. It was used in broad daylight. It was orchestrated, and it's based on the principles of what we call free energy. In other words, the principles...
Well, 0-point energy.
Something like that. It goes under various names: orgone energy, 0-point energy, vacuum energy, all these names. But it uses some other type of technology which can, change that material into dust. And what we, would say is that this technology can be used for other purposes. This technology, we now know it exists. We know it exists because the towers are no longer there. Right? So that's why it's important. And people say, well, why is this important? Isn't it just a conspiracy theory? The reason why it's important is within that technology is the secret to completely transform our modern world. Okay? We don't need fossil fuel, that's a con. If somebody can modify the weather, this is what I tell people. Somebody moved that hurricane and put it there, for a reason. People can say it's a coincidence if they want, that's absolutely fine. But taken together with the field effect evidence, if you look at the weather data in more detail, which Dr. Wood has put on her website, and you can look at things like the barometric pressure and all that kind of thing, somebody can do weather control. So all this, talk of a sideshow of this Hadley CRU fraud that everyone's been talking about, and of course the BBC hasn't, this is all just a sideshow, because somebody out there has the technology to do these things.
Andrew, that is all we have got time for. Thank you to everyone for watching our special 2-hour show, and for those who texted, and thanks to my very special guests, Andrew Johnson and Dr. Judy Wood. If you want more information, why not visit the Edge Media forum page for this show at edgemediatv.com, where all our guest websites are listed. Next week, we'll be back with yet another exciting show that might even change your life. Until then, remember, they're watching you, watching us, watching them. Cheerio.